Hotel manager slaps an undercover black CEO. Unaware she owns the hotel. A single camera phone captures a tense standoff in the lobby of the Alden Hotel, its lofty chandelier reflecting off polished marble floors. Hotel manager Richard Patterson stands, his face contorted in anger. Opposite him stands a petite black woman with bags in her arms, evidently worn from travel. She looks uneasy but determined. Nearby guests pause, phones in hand, filming. A hush falls across the grand entrance. Suddenly, in front of gasping onlookers, Richard raises his hand. The sharp crack of the slap reverberates through the lobby. Luggage spills. Silence. In that moment, no one suspects this stunned guest is, in fact, the hotel's new owner. The Alden Hotel in Midtown Manhattan boasted an immaculate reputation for luxury and service, built over decades of catering to the city's elite. But beneath the polished surface, tensions brewed among staff, especially since rumors began swirling about a mysterious new owner supposedly taking over soon. Preserving the hotel's spotless image meant everything to manager Richard Patterson. He was driven, ambitious, and perhaps a little too eager to prove his worth. This morning, he had been on edge from the moment he walked in. Perhaps it was the dwindling number of VIP reservations, or the hushed, knowing glances from employees who sensed a new corporate era looming. Either way, he felt something big was about to happen. That afternoon, an unremarkable figure slid into the lobby. Clad in a comfortable sweatshirt, dark jeans, and sensible boots, Victoria Gray wasn't at all the flashy type who usually strolled in. She was small in stature, with a quiet confidence that made her presence easy to overlook. But if anyone took a closer look, they might have noticed the air of authority behind her warm eyes. She approached the front desk, where junior concierge Claire Jones greeted her. "Welcome to the Alden Hotel," Claire said, her well-rehearsed tone loaded with the standard courtesy. "How may I assist you today?" Victoria gave a small, polite smile. "I have a reservation under Gray," she replied, sliding forward her ID and a black credit card. Claire's eyes flickered, her curiosity piqued by the unusual credit card design. She typed away at the computer, while the hustle of the hotel lobby grew behind Victoria. A flurry of tourists checking in, business people rushing to meetings, and valets scrambling outside. The overhead lighting glinted off the crystal chandelier, and footsteps echoed on the glossy marble floor. Scowling from behind his office window, Richard noticed Claire unexpectedly motion to him. It's unusual for her to need management approval for a standard room check-in, so he hurried out, suspecting an issue. "Is there a problem, Claire?" he asked, his tone clipped. The mild annoyance in his voice made his subordinate uneasy. Claire pointed to the screen. "There seems to be a discrepancy with Ms. Gray's reservation. The system doesn't show any recorded deposit, but she's certain she made one." Richard sighed and focused on Victoria, scanning her from head to toe. She held her posture confidently, but her clothing suggested she might be an average traveler. His first assumption was that she might be trying to pull one over on the hotel. "Ms. Gray," he said, forcing politeness, "do you have a confirmation number or a receipt of payment?" Victoria hesitated. "I made the arrangement through an agent," she explained. "I have the confirmation email." She pulled out her phone to show him, but Richard waved it away. Impatience etched into his features. "That won't be necessary." He eyed the fancy credit card. While he had encountered black cards used by wealthy clients, he remained suspicious of this woman's simple, worn attire. He was quick to jump to conclusions, a habit formed by years of managing high-profile guests and dealing with a fair share of scammers. "It's likely just a glitch. Claire, recheck the system. Ms. Gray, we'll get you set up, but please step aside so other guests may check in. Once it's sorted, we'll let you know." Victoria stiffened, aware of Richard's dismissive tone. She inclined her head and moved aside with her bags. A well-dressed couple behind her approached the desk, and Richard greeted them with a warm, almost obsequious smile. The difference in the manager's attitude was stark and palpable. The couple walked away moments later, clearly impressed by the easy check-in process, and never guessing the tension that simmered right behind them. Waiting near a plush armchair, Victoria observed the staff interactions with other guests. She was here on a secret mission, to assess and experience her newest acquisition from the ground up. The company she led had decided to step into the hospitality industry. She preferred to see the raw reality of their new properties rather than rely on contrived tours. After all, a hotel was only as good as how it treated its least glamorous guest. Suddenly, she heard Richard's voice ring out again. "Ms. Gray, please come back to the desk." The mild scorn in his tone set her nerves on edge. She approached, phone in hand, ready to show her email if needed. "Yes?" she asked, maintaining composure. "It appears that the final deposit never went through," Richard said flatly. "I'm afraid we cannot honor this reservation unless you can produce immediate payment." Pushing down a simmer of frustration, Victoria calmly showed her email confirmations, each bearing the Alden Hotel's official letterhead and the last 4 digits of her credit card. "As you can see, I was charged for a 3-night stay, including a deposit." He scrolled through the images with a frown. "This is dated 2 weeks ago. Sometimes cancellations occur if the deposit fails to process. Miss, do you have the funds to pay for a new reservation?" Her annoyance sparked at his tone, but she nodded politely. "Of course," she answered, offering her card again. Richard took it, but paused. His suspicious glance at the card turned to a scrutinizing stare at Victoria herself. He typed the numbers into the computer. A brief process screen flashed. A moment later, an error code displayed. "Transaction declined," the computer read in bold red letters, as if mocking them both. Victoria frowned. "That can't be right. I used this card just last week in Paris. It must be a system issue on your end." Richard let out a low, exasperated chuckle. "Ma'am, it's not uncommon for certain guests to claim system issues when they can't actually pay." The hidden condescension stung. "I'm sorry, but if we can't verify your payment, we'll have to ask you to leave." At that moment, the hustle and bustle of the lobby seemed to die. People passing by perked up their ears or turned their heads. Hotels in Manhattan rarely had such dramatic scenes unfold in broad daylight, especially not in the Alden's opulent lobby. Claire's eyes flicked nervously from Victoria to Richard, anxious to diffuse the situation. Victoria's frustration mounted, but she also felt an unexpected pang of heartbreak. She had carefully planned this trip to see how staff would treat an average guest, but the manager's scorn threaded something sharper, the tang of discrimination. "Mr. Patterson," she began, using his name with measured politeness. "This is unacceptable. I assure you that I am more than capable of paying for my stay." Richard didn't seem to hear her. His own tension peaked as more eyes fell on them. The manager in him recognized the importance of placating the audience, so he tried a different approach. "Perhaps if you'd step into my office, we can verify your finances more discreetly." He gestured toward a hallway behind the front desk. Victoria composed herself, nodded, and followed him. A few bystanders, curious about the outcome, turned their attention back to their own business, though Claire's nervous expression suggested trouble would erupt soon enough. Entering the manager's office, Victoria noticed it was impeccably clean. Awards for excellence lined the walls. A laminated letter from the hotel's previous owners praising Richard's performance was framed proudly. Reassuring herself that everything would soon be clarified, she turned to face the manager. "Before we start, I'd like you to know I am not trying to create a scene. There must be a simple technical problem," she began. "I'm with a corporate group that—" "Miss Gray," Richard interrupted, refusing to hear more. "I've had enough of these sob stories. I personally see to it that scammers don't take advantage of our establishment. We have high standards to maintain." Infuriated and perplexed, Victoria pressed, How am I a scammer? I showed you verifiable proof. It's easy to fabricate that, he retorted, tapping the desk. Now, either you come up with an alternative form of payment, or I'm going to call security to escort you out. We're done here. Outside, Claire hovered uncertainly near the door, biting her lip. Through a crack, she heard the heated exchange. Mr. Patterson, let's remain civil. I can, Victoria offered, but Richard waved off her words with a dismissive gesture. I am done indulging you, he said sharply. Gather your things and leave. Victoria's jaw tightened. She had tried to approach this as a paying customer, but it was time to reveal a greater truth. She reached inside her bag for a folder. I think you're making a serious mistake. Read these documents, and then maybe you'll understand. He let out a hollow laugh. Ma'am, no more theatrics. He turned for the door, ready to have her forcibly removed if need be. But as they opened the office door, Claire gasped. Mr. Patterson, wait! Before she could finish, the manager, exasperated, brushed past her and stepped toward the lobby with Victoria trailing, documents still in hand. That's when it happened. An older couple waiting for checkout noticed the back and forth, recognized the tension, and began filming. Richard turned abruptly, his voice raised. I've asked you to leave, Ms. Gray. Passers-by slowed, drawn by the commotion. Victoria's voice rose too. Look at the documents, Mr. Patterson. The crescendo of repressed frustration, humiliation, and the crowd's pressure got the better of him. In one impulsive, misguided motion, Richard's hand shot up and cracked across Victoria's cheek. A collective gasp rippled through the lobby. Phones lifted. Luggage dropped. Silence consumed everything for a frozen beat of time. In that stunned moment, Richard's chest rose and fell rapidly, as if he realized the gravity of what he had just done. But the costly mistake was already made, digitally immortalized by half a dozen smartphones recording from across the opulent hall. And the truth behind Victoria's identity still remained hidden from the horrified viewers, all except one staff member who had just read an internal memo. The Alden Hotel had a new CEO, a woman named Victoria Gray. The moment Richard's hand collided with Victoria's cheek, the world seemed to freeze in place. Guests and staff alike stood statue still, the shock settling in like a cold wind through the lavish corridors of the Alden. Victoria staggered a step backward, her hand pressed to her face. For a flicker of an instant, indignation and hurt flashed across her eyes. The documents she'd been clutching spilled onto the polished tile floor. As if yanked out of a trance, people in the lobby erupted into reaction. Murmurs burst into exclamations. "Oh my God, did he just hit her?" someone cried. Others demanded, "Call security," or "Call the police." Cell phone cameras zoomed in. Some bystanders live-streamed. The footage ricocheted onto social media within seconds, carried by hashtags that would soon dominate timelines. Alden Hotel. Assault. Manager meltdown. Justice for Victoria. Richard froze, a horrific mix of rage and regret contorting his face. The adrenaline seemed to drain out of him instantly, leaving him looking ghost pale. He stammered, glancing from Victoria to the sea of wide-eyed witnesses. He wanted to shout that he'd been provoked, that this was not what it seemed, but no words came. Claire Jones, trembling from head to toe, rushed forward to help Victoria gather her papers. "Ms. Gray, are you all right? Please, let me help you." She fussed over her, anxiously checking for any sign of serious injury. The delicate bruise forming on Victoria's cheek made Claire's stomach twist with guilt and horror. Victoria's breath steadied enough for her to speak, though her voice trembled. This was completely uncalled for. She peered around at the gathering crowd, her expression a cocktail of shock and quiet fury. Still reeling, Richard instinctively tried to reassert his authority. Once the shock wore off, he realized how many eyes and cameras were capturing this. "Everyone, Back to your business, he barked, though his voice had lost its usual commanding resonance. We have this under control, but the crowd wasn't budging. Another wave of gasps erupted as Claire, feeling a moral obligation to protect the hotel's new boss, blurted out, "Mr. Patterson, can't you see? She's..." Victoria raised a hand to quiet Claire, shaking her head slightly, as if to say, "Not yet." She wanted to handle this on her own terms. With a deep breath, she squared her shoulders. "Mr. Patterson," she said, each word resonating in the hushed lobby, "I gave you every chance to do the right thing. Now, I need to make a phone call." Richard frowned. "If you're thinking of calling the police, Miss Gray, No." Victoria's tone was resolute. "I'm calling my legal team, and you will address me as Ms. Gray until further notice." She strode out of the building, ignoring the throbbing pain in her cheek, and stepped onto the sidewalk, where city traffic rumbled. The swirling emotions inside her demanded composure. Hotel staff parted like the Red Sea to let her through. Once outside, she pressed a hand against a lamppost to steady herself, pulling out her phone with the other hand. Back in the lobby, Richard tried to salvage the situation. Striding to the front desk, he hissed at Claire, "Get security. I want that woman off the premises immediately." Claire paled, shaking her head. "But Mr. Patterson, I can't do that," she whispered fearfully. "What did you say?" he snapped. "I just got an internal memo this morning. There's a new CEO. Her name is Victoria Gray. That woman, that was her. I saw the memo with her photo. It's definitely her," Claire managed to say, her voice wavering. "She owns the Alden Hotel now, or at least the majority stake." If possible, Richard's face grew even paler. The polished composure he prided himself on dissolved into a sense of impending doom. Numbly, he sank against the front desk. His eyes flicked wildly, searching for some reprieve in the chaos, but finding none. Meanwhile, the social media storm was already brewing outside. Pedestrians in front of the Alden had started to gather after seeing the fiasco on Twitter or Instagram, curious to witness the uproar. Some recognized Victoria, pointing in disbelief at the woman leaning against the lamppost while on her phone. "Is that the lady who just got slapped by the manager?" one bystander asked. "I saw it live on TikTok." Victoria, phone against her ear, paced in a pocket of relative calm, trying to ignore the swirl of voices and cameras around her. A crisp voice answered on the other end. "Good afternoon, Miss Gray. Is everything all right?" she exhaled. "Not exactly. I need you to alert the legal team. I also want you to inform the board. There's been an incident at the Alden." She paused, the sting in her cheek flaring. "I'm going to need statements from them, and put someone on public relations now." "Understood. We're on it immediately." "Should we dispatch a representative to your location?" her assistant asked, concern edging into her voice. "Yes, please, and tell them to be prepared for reporters, or at least a crowd. We'll need to craft our narrative quickly." Hanging up, Victoria inhaled the cool city air. It had been a long time since she'd been physically struck, and certainly never in such a public, humiliating fashion. Yet she wouldn't let anger consume her. She was still in charge, still the victor, even if not everyone realized it yet. Returning inside, she found the entire lobby in turmoil. Hotel guests, staff members, and newly arrived security guards all milled about. Some demanded explanations. Others snatched furtive glances at Richard and then at Victoria. The tension practically crackled in the air. Claire, seeing Victoria approach, rushed up with tears in her eyes. "Ms. Gray, I'm so sorry about all this. If I had known, I would have..." Victoria gently placed a hand on her shoulder, mindful of how many cameras were still rolling. "It's all right, Claire. I appreciate your concern. This wasn't your fault." Richard stood rooted near the front desk, flanked by two uniformed security personnel who looked anxious and uncertain. He eyed Victoria with something akin to dread. Now that he knew her true identity, the enormity of his mistake weighed on his sagging shoulders. "Victoria, Ms. Gray," he began haltingly, stumbling over the words. "I had no idea. I was only trying to... We have protocols." She regarded him silently, letting him twist. Enough was enough. She stepped forward and spoke in a clear voice so that any recording device would catch every syllable. "Mr. Patterson, you have assaulted me in public view. You have made baseless accusations against my character. You have refused to review valid documents. You have insulted my capacity to pay. And now, you have discovered that I am the majority owner of this establishment." A hush fell. "You are hereby relieved of your duties, effective immediately." At that, audible gasps broke out. Richard's eyes bugged, and the color drained completely from his face. This is some misunderstanding, Ms. Gray. Madam CEO, I can't just be fired like this," he sputtered, gesturing theatrically at the staff. Victoria's tone held firm authority. "I assure you, I have full jurisdiction to fire any staff member I see unfit to represent my hotel." She glanced at the security guards. "Please escort Mr. Patterson to gather his personal belongings and ensure he leaves the premises peacefully." The guards stiffened, uncertain about laying hands on a man who had been their direct superior just moments ago. But they obeyed, stepping up to Richard with measured caution. Now in tears, Richard tried one last gambit. "You can't do this. You haven't heard my side." Victoria locked eyes with him. "I did. And I felt it when your hand struck my face," she said in a low voice. "That's all I need to hear," he faltered, swallowing thickly as the security detail took him by the arm. One of the guards cleared his throat. "Please, Mr. Patterson, come with us." Richard's desperate gaze swept around the lobby. Employees avoided eye contact, some looking away so as not to drown in the guilt of what they'd witnessed. Others stared with stunned relief, as though a tyrant had finally been toppled. Slowly, he allowed himself to be led away. A hush lingered even after the doors closed behind Richard. The gravity of what had just ensued was written on every face. The charismatic but harsh manager had been instantly removed after violently crossing a line, and not just with any guest, but with the soon-to-be-known CEO. Word spread in hushed whispers. Tense excitement mixed with apprehension. If they had all known who she was earlier, would they have treated her differently? And for those who did suspect, why didn't they speak up? Victoria took a deep breath and addressed the lobby. "For anyone who is still checking in or checking out, be assured that the Alden stands by its reputation of excellence. I regret that you've witnessed this horrific incident. I promise I will take every measure to ensure your safety and comfort during your stay." Turning to Claire, she said softly, "Thank you for your help. Please assist the next guest." As Victoria gathered her documents from the floor and started to head to the elevator, multiple guests and staff erupted into spontaneous applause. The sound was uncertain, as if they weren't sure if cheering was appropriate, but it carried a collective sense of relief and solidarity. Some were simply happy that a small measure of justice had been instantaneously served. Behind her, the swirl of social media coverage picked up. Bystanders uploaded new clips of Richard's walk of shame. Others posted triumphal updates about the woman he had assaulted being the CEO. The story was going viral, a real-time cautionary tale about prejudice, power, and unfortunate assumptions. Victoria stepped into the elevator, her cheek still tingling. Though Claire had brought her an ice pack, she held it in place, feeling a surge of adrenaline and clarity. She knew the next few hours would define the Alden's future and her own. Because in an age of instant media, every second counted, every misstep flared into a reputation crisis. She also understood that beyond the optics, there was a bigger story to tell here, one of accountability, respect, and the never-ending fight against discrimination in even the most gilded corners of the world. The elevator doors glided shut with a quiet chime, leaving behind a lobby still buzzing with murmurs, apologies, and distant camera flashes. Above it all, an extravagant chandelier sparkled, oblivious to the day's drama, a glittering reminder of the luxury brand that Victoria Gray now officially commanded. Victoria stepped into the executive suite on the 10th floor, one of the most exclusive accommodations in the Alden. Plush carpeting swallowed her footsteps as she proceeded into a spacious living room, kept pristine by housekeeping. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a sunlit Manhattan skyline. She sank onto a sumptuous leather couch, dropping her bags with a sigh. Her carefully orchestrated plan to observe employee conduct incognito had derailed in the most dramatic way possible. An array of notifications lit her phone like fireworks. Texts from close friends, calls from board members, and emails from well-wishers all clamored for her attention. Alden Hotel assault was storming every platform. Some posts lauded her immediate and decisive action. Others criticized the violence and questioned the Alden's corporate culture. The board of directors was also in a flurry, wanting urgent clarification. Just as she took her first breath of relative calm, the doorbell chimed. She rose, pressing the ice pack gently to her cheek. Through the peephole, she saw a beleaguered face she recognized. Donovan Harris, the newly appointed Chief Operating Officer of Gray Hospitality Ventures, the parent company she helmed. She opened the door. Donovan entered, his tie askew, his face drenched in worry. "Victoria, I saw the footage. Are you hurt?" She managed a faint yet reassuring smile. "Just a bruise." He frowned. "This is beyond unacceptable." He glanced around, noting the lavish surroundings. "Are you at least comfortable here?" "Better than in the lobby," she replied, ushering him to a seat. "Have you spoken to the rest of the board?" He sank into an armchair, nodding gravely. "We had an emergency conference call. Everyone's reeling, but I assured them you're taking immediate corrective steps, like dismissing Richard." Pausing, he added, "Though some directors want deeper investigations. They're worried about any hidden patterns in staff behavior." Victoria bit her lip, nodding. "Yes, we can't let this appear as an isolated case if prejudice festers in other corners. We'll do a comprehensive review of staff training, hiring practices, and complaint logs. The world is watching how we respond." Donovan studied Victoria's bruised cheek, guilt flashing. "If only we had insisted you reveal yourself from the start. Maybe this could have been avoided." She shook her head. "Then, we'd have gotten a polished performance from the manager. We'd never know the truth of how an ordinary guest is treated. This way, I got the unvarnished reality." A flicker of sadness crept into her eyes. "Though, I never expected it to escalate so violently." Just then, Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. The board was requesting a video conference in 20 minutes. She sighed, turning to Donovan. "Let's get ready. We owe them a solid plan." 15 minutes later, Victoria set up her laptop on the suite's marble-topped desk. Donovan hovered behind her, anxious. One by one, the directors' faces materialized on the screen's grid. Older executives in tailored suits, the occasional background of a corporate office or a pristine home study, a crisp voice belonging to Grace Lynn, the CFO, greeted them. "Victoria, good to see you safe. We've been following the developments online. Horrific! Fill us in." Victoria folded her hands. "I arrived at the Alden under a standard reservation. Mr. Patterson refused to acknowledge my valid deposit, implied I was scamming the hotel, and ultimately struck me in public." A hush fell over the digital boardroom. "I terminated his employment on the spot. Now we need to address the broader implications: staff culture, public relations, and potential legal action." Grace nodded sharply, face tight with concern. Another board member, older with steely hair and a serious expression, jumped in. Roger Thomas, Corporate Counsel for Gray Hospitality. We're prepared to file charges against Mr. Patterson for assault. But more importantly, we should ensure guests see this as a swift and just response, preserving the Alden brand. A press conference may be necessary. Donovan chimed in. Exactly. We've had reporters calling the corporate office non-stop. They're seeking statements from Ms. Gray, as well as any comment from hotel management or staff. Grace flicked her gaze to Victoria. Do you want to appear publicly, or shall we task a PR spokesperson? Victoria blew out a breath. I think it's important I address the public directly, to show I'm not hiding. Yet, we must be strategic. The number one priority is telling the truth, that we won't tolerate abuse or discrimination in any form. Then, we pivot to describing how we'll rectify any systemic issues here. The directors nodded their agreement, and the conversation shifted into meticulous planning mode. They hammered out talking points, crisis management strategies, social media guidelines, and timelines for staff training. By the end of the meeting, a rough blueprint emerged. Victoria would hold a press conference in the Alden's banquet hall the following day at 10 a.m. Their legal counsel would file a formal complaint with the NYPD. HR would engage employees in immediate sensitivity training. A thorough, independent audit would be commissioned to evaluate the culture at the Alden. Once the call ended, Victoria leaned back in her chair, massaging her temple. The bruise throbbed dully. It's going to be a long night, Donovan nodded. We'll get through it. I'll coordinate with HR to arrange that training ASAP. Also, staff need reassurance about their jobs, the hotel's direction, all of it. Victoria stood, gazing out at the city. Right. For too long, Richard's management style might have overshadowed employees' ability to speak up. Now's our chance to reform from the ground up. Donovan excused himself to start making calls. Left alone again, Victoria replayed the afternoon's events in her mind. The sting of the slap mingled with an echo of Richard's furious voice. She found herself questioning how many times marginalized guests had endured lesser maltreatment, microaggressions not captured on camera. Enough was enough. She resolved to infuse the Alden with an ethic of respect, so deeply that no staff member would ever get away with prejudice again. Night descended on Manhattan soon after. The skyline glowed with the shimmer of corporate towers, each lit window hinting at a life inside. Victoria changed into office-appropriate attire, an elegant navy suit. She spent several hours drafting her public statement, carefully balancing condemnation of Richard's actions with a broader vision of inclusivity for all Alden guests moving forward. She also responded to hundreds of supportive texts and emails from colleagues, clients, and even hotel chain competitors who decried the assault. Meanwhile, within the hotel's staff break room, word spread like wildfire. Housekeepers whispered of the earlier commotion, bellhops shared clips they found online, and desk clerks anxiously debated if they'd be receiving new instructions in the morning. Even the hotel chef, Henri Dupont, who rarely left his kitchen domain, found out from a line cook. He clucked his tongue in dismay upon learning that the woman assaulted was, in fact, the new owner. Claire Jones, exhausted and nursing a headache, had retreated to an unused corner of the break room. A wave of guilt washed over her. Even though she'd tried to help Ms. Gray, she couldn't shake the feeling she should have intervened sooner, shouted out her identity before the slap. She buried her face in her hands. It was only when another clerk patted her shoulder and told her softly, "It wasn't your fault," that she finally let herself breathe. Around midnight, Victoria received a text from a friend who worked as a journalist at a major news network. "They're running the story tomorrow morning. Expect massive coverage." Alongside the text was a link to a digital article featuring freeze-frame images of the slap. Victoria grimaced, feeling an odd sense of vulnerability. This was no quiet boardroom struggle. This was a viral public fiasco. She needed rest, but her nerves wouldn't let her sleep. Casting her gaze around the luxurious suite, She was reminded of the stark contrast between the Alden's facade of refined elegance and the brutal reality she faced earlier that day. She walked to the window and looked out over the city lights. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "we start rebuilding with honesty." The next morning, a hush of anxious anticipation filled the Alden Hotel. The entire staff reported early, bleary-eyed and uncertain. They'd been informed that Ms. Gray, no longer an anonymous CEO, would address them before her public press conference. In the expansive banquet hall, employees formed small clusters. Waiters in crisp uniforms made whispered speculations. Security personnel fidgeted, glancing around. Housekeeping staff clutched their cleaning supplies, feeling out of place in such a formal gathering. Then, at precisely 9:00 a.m., Victoria entered through a side door, accompanied by Donovan and a few senior members of Gray Hospitality Ventures. The room instantly quieted. She climbed onto a small platform stage so everyone could see her. A hush fell as she surveyed the crowd, noticing fear, shame, curiosity, and hope in their expressions. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "I want to start by saying I regret that our first official gathering in this new chapter is under these circumstances. Yet, I believe every crisis is also a chance to grow." She paused, letting her words settle over the attentive faces. "Yesterday, I came here unannounced because I believe in first-hand knowledge. I wanted to see how the Alden treats guests when no one is looking." A couple of staff members bowed their heads. She pressed on. "What happened was unacceptable. An assault, driven by prejudice and anger, has no place in this hotel or any establishment. I understand some of you might be confused, worried about whether you'll be blamed. Let me assure you, I'm not here to punish anyone who did not commit a crime. But I am here to change our culture. Effective immediately, all Alden staff will undergo sensitivity training, courtesy training, and conflict resolution seminars. Staff should treat every guest with respect and dignity, no matter their skin color, their attire, or their perceived status." She saw a wave of nods ripple through the crowd. Some employees looked relieved, others reflective. After her short speech, she opened the floor for questions. A young bellhop raised his hand. "Ms. Gray, is Richard Patterson?" He didn't finish, but everyone knew the question. Victoria nodded. "He is no longer employed here. Legal actions are pending due to the assault. I understand that can be shocking, especially if you respected him as a manager. But I must uphold a zero-tolerance policy for violence or discrimination." Another hand shot up. It was Claire, twisting her fingers nervously. "Ms. Gray, what should we do if we feel we've seen or experienced unfair treatment? Before, it felt like we had nowhere to go." Victoria's expression softened. "I'll be introducing new guidelines for reporting misconduct or discrimination. Anonymous hotlines, direct line to HR, mediated conflict resolution. There will be multiple avenues for you to be heard without fear of retaliation. That is my promise." Applause broke out, cautious but genuine. Victoria took it as a sign that change, while painful, might be welcomed by many employees. After fielding a few more questions, she closed the staff meeting. People dispersed, some quickly returning to their posts, others lingering to discuss the revelations. The clock approached 9:30, and she had half an hour before the press conference. Outside, a ring of reporters and camera crews had already gathered. Word had spread quickly. The Alden Hotel was ground zero for a breaking story on racial bias and corporate responsibility. Microphones, camera lenses, and barrage of lights awaited the new CEO. With her carefully prepared statement in hand, Victoria reminded herself to stay calm, present a strong, compassionate face to the world. She hurried back to her suite to freshen up. Soon, it was showtime. When she emerged into the hotel's grand foyer, it was as if she'd stepped onto a wide red carpet, lights flashing, reporters jockeying for position. Two staffers escorted her into the large, gilded ballroom used for weddings and conferences, now transformed into a media center with chairs arranged before a podium. A banner behind the podium displayed the Alden's ornate crest next to the Gray Hospitality Ventures silhouette logo. Donovan stood off to one side, along with Grace Lynn and Roger Thomas, prepared to offer additional statements if needed. Victoria approached the podium, ignoring the flash of cameras that momentarily blinded her. The microphone whined with feedback before settling into silence. She took a breath, looking at the faces peering up at her. Some curious, some critical, some sympathetic. "Good morning," she began. "My name is Victoria Gray, CEO of Gray Hospitality Ventures and the new majority owner of the Alden Hotel." A flurry of camera shutters clicked. "Yesterday, I experienced an incident of physical assault by the hotel's manager, Richard Patterson. This was documented on social media and has understandably caused an uproar." She paused, scanning the room. "Let me be clear. Violence and discrimination have no place in my organization or in any professional setting. While Mr. Patterson's actions were personal, it's my responsibility as CEO to address the systemic issues that may have allowed this behavior to fester. Therefore, I have taken decisive steps." She outlined Richard's immediate termination, the comprehensive staff training, the policy audits, and the legal complaint. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras zoomed in. One journalist jumped in. "Ms. Gray, do you believe this was a racially motivated attack?" Victoria's lips tightened. She knew the question was coming. Richard Patterson's behavior included dismissive language and assumptions about my ability to pay, based on my appearance and possibly my race, she said, choosing her words carefully. "While the court of law will determine if racial bias was the defining factor, I can say this. The experience felt colored by prejudice. It is my duty to address that head-on." Another reporter piped up. "How has the public responded? Are there calls for a boycott of the Alden?" She nodded. "Some individuals online have advocated for a boycott. I understand their anger, but I invite them and everyone else to give us a chance to make things right. My team and I are committed to rebuilding an inclusive, respectful environment." A third reporter asked, "What do you say to critics who claim you overreacted by firing Mr. Patterson on the spot?" Victoria replied firmly, "An assault is not a matter of discipline. It's a crime. Moreover, as a manager, you set the tone for your entire staff. That tone cannot be one of hostility or prejudice." Her measured, unequivocal answers seemed to satisfy most. After a few more questions, the press conference concluded. Cameras still rolled, capturing the moment as Victoria stepped away from the podium, squared her shoulders, and accepted the handshakes of her senior leadership who stood by her side. In a side corridor, away from the bright lights, Donovan approached with relief. "That went well. You got the message out clearly," Grace Lynn added. "Yes, I think the sincerity came across. Great job," Victoria exhaled. "Thanks. Now, the real work begins, ensuring all these promises become reality." As the day wore on, mainstream media picked up the story even more aggressively. Larger networks debated the incident's implications, calling it a symbol of deep-rooted biases in the hospitality industry. Some praised Victoria's immediate response as groundbreaking. Others questioned how many similar injustices went unreported. Meanwhile, justice for Victoria trended across multiple social media platforms, overshadowing the earlier inflammatory hashtags. Back in her suite, Victoria finally allowed herself a moment of reflection. The bruise on her cheek had turned faintly purple. She traced it lightly, feeling a complicated mix of pain, anger, and hope. A cooling wind fluttered the curtains, whispering of possibility. She reminded herself that in crisis lay opportunity, to show the world what genuine accountability and leadership looked like. But behind the optimism loomed another weighty concern. Richard Patterson wasn't likely to vanish silently. Could he sue for wrongful termination, claim defamation, or spin a different narrative? Victoria knew she'd need her legal team to stay vigilant. The last thing she wanted was a drawn-out legal war overshadowing the Alden's renaissance. As night slowly reclaimed the sky again, Victoria resolved to push forward. The stage had been set. The cameras had recorded her pledge to uphold real change. There was no turning back. If the staff, the media, and the public at large saw her determination translate into meaningful reforms, perhaps they would trust that the Alden's future would be brighter than its past. While Victoria focused on implementing reforms, Richard Patterson stewed in a modest studio apartment on the edge of Queens. Anger coursed through him. In a single day, he had gone from a respected hotel manager to a public pariah. Every time he scrolled through social media, he saw replays of that damning clip of him slapping Victoria Gray. The condemnation was merciless. His phone buzzed with calls from unknown numbers. Some left threatening voicemails, others jeered, calling him a racist, a monster. He felt cornered, humiliated, and outraged that his career was destroyed by this woman he had foolishly misjudged. His misguided pride refused to accept that he was the villain in this story. By the second day, he reached out to a friend who was a lawyer. Well, more an acquaintance from a networking event. "Kevin," he growled into the phone, "I need to do something. I can't just let her smear me as some vile, violent racist." Kevin's cautious voice replied, "Richard, that clip is everywhere. The evidence is pretty damning. You physically struck her, and you made negative remarks that strongly suggest prejudice. This is not a strong position for a lawsuit." Richard clenched his fist. "What about wrongful termination? There was no formal disciplinary hearing, no internal investigation. She just fired me. I had a contract with the Alden's prior owners." Kevin hesitated. "Your employment was likely at will once the hotel changed ownership, except for certain executive stipulations. Did you read the updated contract? And even if you had protections, assaulting the CEO is a justifiable cause for immediate dismissal in nearly any scenario." Richard paced, bitterness rising in his chest. "I won't go down without a fight. She made me look like a monster. She set me up." A beat of silence followed. Kevin sighed. "Richard, if you proceed, it'll be messy, and I'm not sure you stand a chance. If you sued, it could backfire and lead to countersuits, more negative publicity. Think carefully." Slamming down the phone, he glared at the posts on his screen. The footage looped again. Once more, that moment where frustration and arrogance blinded him into an irreversible mistake. "This isn't fair," he spat, ignoring the voice of reason that whispered how he alone had raised his hand in aggression. The next morning, an unmarked manila envelope arrived at Richard's door. Inside, a typed letter. "You are being served with a formal complaint of assault and battery. Summons enclosed. You are instructed to appear in court on the stated date." He tore the paper in half with trembling rage, but that changed nothing. The lawsuit was real. Desperation fueled him. He turned to social media, crafting a post that read, "I was manipulated and provoked by Ms. Gray. The footage is out of context. I was only defending hotel policy. She threatened me first. The Alden is covering up the truth." He hesitated, reading his own words. His story was shaky, but perhaps some would believe him. He clicked post. Within minutes, comments flooded in. Some anonymous accounts expressed sympathy. Others ridiculed him. More argued back and forth. The swirling chaos online only made him more determined, fueling a twisted sense of indignation. If Victoria Gray wanted a war, he would give her one. Meanwhile, at the Alden, Victoria had convened a small group in the newly renamed Innovation Boardroom. She sat at the head of a sleek glass table. Donovan, Grace, Roger, and two other key executives surrounded her. A laptop connected to a large monitor displayed updates on social media chatter. Donovan pointed at a highlight. Richard Patterson posted a statement blaming you, calling it a setup. Victoria glanced at the text. We expected that. Let's see if he has any actual evidence. She read it carefully. He's claiming that we manipulated him. That's a bold tactic. Grace frowned. It's damaging, though. Some people might latch on to that narrative, that you intentionally disguised yourself so you could catch him in the act. Victoria shrugged. And he still chose to strike me. Besides, he hardly recognized me disguised. It was normal attire, not a cunning plan. Regardless, we'll let the legal system handle that. We stick to facts. Donovan tapped a folder. Speaking of legal, we've filed the complaint. The DA's office might consider criminal charges as well. They're waiting on witness statements. Several guests, staff members, and those who recorded the video said they would testify. Victoria nodded. Good. But let's proceed carefully. No inflammatory rhetoric from our side. We remain professional. Now, any word from the staff? Morale updates? One of the executives, a short-haired woman named Anita, chimed in. Early feedback is surprisingly supportive. Many staff felt under pressure from Richard's harsh leadership. They're cautiously optimistic about the changes you're implementing. Training sessions are scheduled for next week. We've chosen an outside consultant to handle them. Excellent, Victoria said, flipping through her notes. What about guest feedback? Grace scrolled through a tablet. Reservations initially dipped in the immediate aftermath, but now we're seeing a wave of new bookings from people intrigued by your stance. Hashtags praising your actions are generating positive press. Some guests explicitly commented they booked because they want to support a CEO who fights discrimination. Victoria exhaled with relief. That's good news. Let's ensure all guests receive top-notch service. We can't just be the trending story. We have to prove ourselves in every interaction. After the meeting concluded, Victoria retired to her office, a spacious suite she set up on the top floor for direct oversight of the hotel. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the room in natural light. She studied the cityscape, reflecting on how swiftly a single day could alter lives forever. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother, a retired teacher in Atlanta. Proud of you. Saw the coverage. Stay strong. A small smile curved Victoria's lips. Later that evening, in a swirl of after-work traffic, a black SUV pulled up to the curb outside the Alden. Two men stepped out, dressed in unremarkable suits. They were private investigators hired by Richard Patterson. He had insisted they find anything to discredit Victoria's moral high ground, previous controversies, questionable corporate takeovers, personal skeletons. Something. They approached the front desk with feigned politeness. Hello, one said, flashing a friendly smile at the clerk. We're thinking of booking a high-end suite for a conference. Could we speak to the new CEO, Ms. Gray, by any chance? Ms. Gray's not available right now, came the standard reply. May I take a message? The two men lingered, scanning the lobby. They glimpsed the chandeliers, the impeccably uniformed staff, the gold accents, all typical for a five-star property. But they also spotted the discreet security presence stationed near the manager's office. That told them one thing. The Alden was on heightened alert. All good, the first investigator said. We'll be in touch. They stepped aside, wandering around the perimeter of the lobby under the guise of curiosity. But staff quickly noticed their suspicious manner. Claire Jones, now more confident since the staff meeting, approached politely. Gentlemen, can I help you find something? They excused themselves and left, weaving facts into their conversation. She must have something we can exploit, one murmured. We just need to dig deeper. Online footprints, business deals, personal angles. Richard Patterson's vendetta was just getting started. When Victoria caught wind of two suspicious men in the lobby, her heart tightened. She had nothing to hide, but she also knew how easily truths could be twisted. She decided to stay focused on the future. Her team's vigilance would handle any slander. Still, the harassment, The possibility of a drawn-out legal or reputational struggle, it weighed on her. That night, she scrolled through updates about Richard's attempts to save face on social media, painting himself as the real victim. A small minority of netizens entertained that narrative, but the overwhelming majority who watched the viral clip remained unswayed. People of all backgrounds expressed solidarity with Victoria's stance, celebrating her as a tenacious leader who refused to tolerate injustice, even if it meant confronting bias from within her own organization. It was a spark of hope, a sign that large swaths of society craved accountability. And if Richard Patterson thought he could tear her down again, he would soon learn that Victoria Gray had only begun to wield her rightful power. Within a week, the staff training sessions began. An outside consultant, Dr. Angela Diaz, stood before a group of hotel employees in a bright, airy conference room on the 9th floor. Sunlight streamed in, revealing the participants' uneasy expressions. They wore name tags: housekeepers, receptionists, concierge staff, servers, bartenders, bellhops, all equal in this circle of folding chairs. Dr. Diaz spoke in a calm, encouraging tone. "We're here to foster empathy and fairness in hospitality. Let's start with an icebreaker." She asked them to pair up and share a brief story about a time they felt powerless. The initial hesitancy melted as people began recounting personal anecdotes. A black bellhop describing suspicious stares from wealthy guests. An immigrant housekeeper recalling harsh jokes from colleagues. A front desk clerk admitting her fear of complaining about a manager's condescension. Afterward, Dr. Diaz guided them through role-play scenarios. A guest who appears disheveled but is actually a high-value client. A traveler who speaks broken English but needs urgent assistance. A same-sex couple concerned about discrimination. In each scenario, employees learned how to handle guests with warmth, clear communication, and inclusive respect. By emphasizing real-life experiences and forging emotional connections, Dr. Diaz instilled an awareness that cut deeper than a standard corporate policy. Meanwhile, Victoria watched from the back, occasionally stepping forward to share her perspective. She joined one of the group exercises, pairing with a housekeeping supervisor named Rosa, who was nervous about speaking in front of the CEO. Victoria gently nudged her. "Rosa, you've worked here for years. Your insights on staff culture will help shape our changes." They conversed openly, bridging hierarchical gaps in a way that felt transformative. These sessions rolled out across different shifts so that every Alden employee, from the chef to the night manager, attended. Over time, an undercurrent of renewal swelled in the hallways. Staff began greeting each other with more genuine warmth. Strict formalities of rank softened into mutual respect. Employees who once feared retribution under Richard's authoritarian style sensed a safer atmosphere. Daily staff huddles grew more collaborative, with suggestions welcomed rather than dismissed. Still, challenges remained. Some longtime workers, loyal to Richard's old-school approach, grumbled. They whispered that all this political correctness was a waste of time, that real five-star service hinged on strict discipline. Others worried about whether the Alden would lose its classic prestige. Victoria, mindful of the pushback, asked Dr. Diaz to hold additional Q&A sessions, clarifying that enforcing respectful treatment didn't mean lowering service standards, but rather elevating them. Outside the staff training, life at the Alden hummed with renewed energy. Guests arriving for weekend getaways or business trips noticed the staff's blossoming kindness. Social media posts about the Alden began shifting from outrage to curiosity about the hotel's transformation. Some visitors specifically mentioned the empathy training as a reason they chose to stay, praising the establishment's commitment to fairness. In a surprising turn, occupancy rates soared, outpacing even pre-Richard days. Victoria navigated these developments while juggling pending legal matters. She met with Roger Thomas regularly to track the progress of the assault case. Bystander statements and multiple video angles all but guaranteed a conviction for Richard if the DA formally pressed charges. Still, the wheels of justice turned slowly, and they waited for the official date. Richard's social media rants found fewer ears receptive to his claims of being set up. The tide of public opinion had largely turned against him. One afternoon, Victoria paused on the mezzanine level to watch the swirl of activity below. The Alden's iconic chandelier glittered overhead. Bellhops guided arriving guests with welcoming smiles. Front desk agents offered bottled water to those waiting in line. And a new manager, a graceful middle-aged woman named Simone Carter, was calmly overseeing check-ins, ensuring everything ran smoothly. She was selected not just for her experience, but for her proven record of inclusive leadership at another property in the Gray Hospitality Network. As Victoria leaned against the chrome railing, Claire Jones spotted her from below and waved. Victoria returned the friendly gesture. Claire's bright eyes sparkled with a confidence she hadn't shown before. It was a small moment that reminded Victoria why she was fighting so hard for this cultural shift. If just a few weeks ago, the staff had cowered under Richard's gaze, now they seemed invigorated, proud, and genuinely happy to be part of this hotel. That told her everything about the potential for real transformation. Late that evening, the Alden's lounge buzzed with a pleasant lull of jazz music and soft conversation as guests enjoyed cocktails. Victoria slipped into a corner booth with Donovan, wanting a moment to discuss bigger plans. Sipping a non-alcoholic mocktail, she confided, "Donovan, I'm thinking about a group rate program for non-profit events, especially those focusing on diversity or social impact. We should open the Alden's doors to more than just high-paying clients." He nodded. "That's a wonderful idea. A philanthropic angle that enhances the brand and aligns with your stance on inclusivity. I can have our marketing team draft proposals." An unspoken sense of excitement lingered after that conversation. The standard narrative, a stuffy 5-star hotel catering to only the elite, was shifting. Under Victoria's leadership, the Alden was becoming a place where dignity and hospitality came first. However, not everything was rosy. Across town in Richard Patterson's cramped studio, the private investigators struggled to find any dirt on Victoria. No skeletons, no illegal deals, no personal scandals. The best they uncovered were minor corporate disputes, where Victoria fought for fair wages at other hotels her company acquired. They reported back to him, frustration etched in their voices. "There's nothing. She's clean." A scowl twisted Richard's features as he paced. "Everyone has something. Keep digging. Interview disgruntled staff if you have to." His voice was laced with desperation. Yet the investigators had tried, and staff at the Alden were largely relieved he was gone. They weren't interested in helping him smear the new CEO. A twist of bitterness gnawed at him. Every social media scroll hammered home a reality he hated. People celebrated Victoria Gray. They praised her for bringing progressive change to the Alden, for delivering accountability in stark contrast to his old style. He combed comment sections, reading scathing vile directed at him, occasionally lashing back with his own posts, rants that sank him deeper into a pit of public disgust. Time forged onward. Each passing day, the Alden's renewed culture gained firmer footing. Complaints from staff had plummeted. Guest satisfaction soared. Even corporate interest had grown. Other hotels in Gray Hospitality's portfolio asked for similar training programs. Victoria's actions had ignited a spark that might reshape the industry's approach to hospitality and inclusion. It was around this time that the Alden's marketing department pitched a bold campaign. Short videos featuring staff, from bellhops to housekeeping supervisors, talking about what hospitality means to them. Victoria fully approved, and soon guests browsing the hotel website found these heartfelt clips. A chef explaining how cooking for diverse palates was his way of uniting people. A front desk agent, recalling a time a warm welcome, helped her through personal hardship. These authentic stories resonated far and wide, garnering high engagement online. Bookings thrived, as did staff morale. One night, before heading out, Victoria took a solitary stroll through the corridors. She passed the staff break room where a small poster read, "Respect is not a courtesy, it's a right." She passed a housekeeping cart, where a pair of attendants chatted excitedly in Spanish about how the hotel changed for the better. She felt an overwhelming sense of pride. In just a short time, they had taken the Alden from the site of a humiliating assault to a beacon of inclusive excellence. Yet Richard Patterson's existence still loomed like a thundercloud, threatening a storm. The upcoming court proceedings weighed on her mind, but she chose to trust that truth would prevail. For Victoria, forging a legacy of fairness at the Alden mattered far more than personal vengeance. The transformation was already underway, and it showed no signs of slowing. Weeks passed, and at last, the court date arrived. Victoria dressed conservatively for the occasion, a crisp gray suit, minimal jewelry, hair neatly pinned back. Outside the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse, news vans lined the curb, microphones bristling like weaponry. Reporters hounded every person entering or exiting, hoping to catch a snippet about the sensational CEO slap case, as it had been dubbed. Victoria arrived with Roger Thomas at her side. Donovan and a few supportive board members followed at a respectful distance, their presence signaling corporate solidarity. The morning air felt sharp against Victoria's cheeks. She steeled herself for the glare of cameras and marched through the building's doors, ignoring the shouted questions from journalists. Flashbulbs popped in a staccato rhythm, capturing her calm expression. Inside the courtroom, the hum of murmured voices buzzed. Some members of the public had come out of curiosity, others possibly connected to the hospitality industry. On Victoria's side sat her legal team, including Roger Thomas and an assistant counsel. Across the aisle, Richard Patterson perched rigidly in a suit that seemed too big around the shoulders now that he'd lost weight in his stressful weeks of unemployment. Beside him, a scowling defense attorney flipped through notes. The judge, a silver-haired woman with an austere demeanor, entered. Everyone rose, then settled as the gavel rapped. Proceedings began with the prosecution's opening, describing the assault in stark terms. A manager who, after belittling a guest, physically struck her once her identity as the hotel owner came to light. Video evidence, prosecutors said, left no doubt about his guilt. Then came the defense. Richard's lawyer painted a picture of a manager under extreme stress, manipulated by a secretive CEO with an agenda. He claimed Victoria had orchestrated a scenario to provoke Richard's outburst, citing her social media accounts, selective editing of footage, and her high-powered team as evidence that a normal man stood no chance. Under direct questioning, Victoria recounted the events calmly, describing the check-in fiasco, the office confrontation, and the public slap. The prosecution played the viral video. The clip's sharp, echoing sound of the slap spawned a hushed disquiet in the courtroom. Even Richard seemed to shrink at the replay of his own violence. The judge's gaze was stern. Next, they called Claire Jones. Nervous but determined, she testified about Richard's dismissive behavior and the instant regret she saw in him after the slap. She also recounted how Victoria had shown her confirmation emails. "He just wouldn't believe her," Claire said, wringing her hands. Tears glistened in her eyes as she remembered her helplessness in that moment. Multiple guests testified similarly. They had witnessed an escalating argument triggered by Richard's prejudice and culminating in physical assault. The defense tried to cross-examine them, implying they were biased by social media narratives. But each witness stuck to their recollection. The video evidence overshadowed the defense's attempts to sow doubt. When Richard took the stand, he wore a glower. His lawyer lobbed him softballs. "Were you under extreme pressure, Mr. Patterson?" Did you feel threatened? But his answers lacked credibility. He insisted. She kept goading me, flaunting documents. I thought it was fake. My job was to protect the hotel from fraud. He refused to acknowledge any racist motive, repeating that he treated all guests equally. Under cross-examination, the prosecution hammered him with evidence of past complaints from guests of color that had been quietly settled by the Alden's previous owners. His attempts to minimize them seemed disingenuous. The final blow came when the prosecution introduced the memo about the Alden's change in ownership, emailed to all management-level employees 36 hours prior to the incident. It contained a photo of Victoria Gray. Richard had either ignored it or dismissed it. That negligence, combined with the violent act, destroyed any sympathetic angle he might have had. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for a surprisingly short time. By late afternoon, they returned a guilty verdict on the misdemeanor assault charge. The judge sentenced Richard to probation and community service, plus mandated anger management counseling. The legal system moved swiftly, perhaps propelled by the high-profile nature of the case. When the judge announced the verdict, a soft murmur of relief spread through the courtroom. Richard's face fell, blotchy with humiliation. Outside, Victoria found a mob of reporters waiting. She paused on the courthouse steps, gazing at the sea of microphones. Donovan, at her elbow, whispered, "Should we release a statement here?" Victoria took a breath. "Yes, but keep it brief." Stepping up, she spoke calmly. "We respect the court's decision. This was never about vengeance. It was about accountability. I sincerely hope Mr. Patterson uses this experience to reflect on his actions and grow. Our focus at the Alden remains on ensuring every guest and employee feels safe, valued, and respected. Thank you." A swirl of follow-up questions erupted, but she stepped away, letting Roger field them. In that moment, a sense of closure brushed over her. Richard Patterson had been held legally accountable, and her own name was cleared of any set-up conspiracy nonsense. She walked down the steps, ignoring the cameras trailing her, stepping into the black sedan waiting curbside. Through the tinted window, she caught a glimpse of Richard being ushered out another exit, shoulders slumped, a small cluster of cameras still pursuing him. They'd capture a fallen man, undone by his own prejudice, and a single reckless moment. Victoria's car pulled away, merging into New York's bustling afternoon traffic. Though the tension remained in her chest, a brighter path lay ahead. The Alden was flourishing under the new policies. Staff morale soared, and public gratitude poured in. The next chapter of the old hotel's legacy wouldn't be tarnished by that afternoon's violence. It would be defined by transformative leadership. She closed her eyes, letting the city's hum lull her. Justice had been served. Now she could truly focus on the future. Several months passed, and the Alden thrived in ways no one had imagined. The once siloed staff, hindered by a stifling manager, now practiced open communication, kindness, and a commitment to excellence. New hires filled vacancies left by those who departed with Richard's downfall. Simone Carter efficiently managed daily operations, respecting both staff and guests. Word of the Alden's transformation spread. Travel blogs, newspapers, and television segments ran stories about this iconic Manhattan hotel, now leading the industry in inclusivity training. Corporate retreats and conferences flocked to host events here, drawn to the synergy of classic luxury and the progressive stance championed by its CEO. Within the halls, subtle but profound changes blossomed. The break room, once quiet except for hushed gossip, was now lively with staff from every department mingling, trading stories and comedic anecdotes about the day's interactions. As part of a new staff recognition program, gold stars and notes of appreciation were pinned to a community board each week, publicly celebrating employees who went above and beyond. Victoria walked the floors regularly, greeting employees by name. She met a new front desk agent, a young trans woman who explained she had never felt so welcomed in a workplace. She encountered a newly promoted housekeeping manager, Rosa, who overcame her language insecurities to excel in her leadership role. Victoria smiled at these transformations, each one a testament to the culture of empathy they'd fought to build. Of course, not everyone forgot the scandal. Occasionally, a curious guest would ask staff about that day, or about Richard Patterson's fate. At times, journalists asked for follow-up interviews, sniffing for fresh drama. But the story had largely lost its shock factor. It was old news overshadowed by the positive changes and the hotel's philanthropic outreach. In one philanthropic move, the Alden partnered with a local nonprofit that helped underprivileged youth explore career opportunities in hospitality. Twice a month, groups of eager teenagers visited the hotel for hands-on workshops, shadowing staff, and learning about event planning, culinary arts, and customer relations. Paid internships were offered to those who showed exceptional promise. Victoria believed in investing not only in her employees, but also in the broader community, ensuring that the doors of opportunity remained open to all. Meanwhile, Richard Patterson endured the aftermath of his conviction. Stripped of his professional reputation, he found only menial or part-time work. Sometimes he lurked on social media, consumed by bitterness. That was until the day he was forced to join court-mandated anger management sessions. Surrounded by people with similar charges, he initially scoffed. Yet over time, confronted by counselors and other participants, he began to grasp the magnitude of his actions. Real shame and regret filtered through his stubborn pride. In a moment of rare introspection, he composed an email to Victoria. It read, "Ms. Gray, I'm writing to acknowledge the harm I caused that day. I do not expect forgiveness or reparation, but I want you to know I accept responsibility for my actions. I'm sorry for my disrespect and violence. I hope you continue the positive changes at the Alden." Richard. Victoria received this email late one evening. The catharsis she'd expected to feel evaporated into a somber reflection. She recognized that apology as the first step of growth. She typed a short reply. "Richard, thank you for your message. Take care, Victoria Gray." That was it. She refused to dwell on further contact. Some pains could not be undone, but if he was ready to change, she could at least acknowledge his apology. On a warm spring afternoon, the Alden hosted a lavish gala for a prominent cultural arts organization. The event showcased local artists, dancers, and musicians in the regal banquet hall. Hundreds of guests roamed, enthralled by the synergy of innovation and tradition. By evening, the corridor to the hall bustled with elegant attendees. At the heart of it all stood Victoria, greeting donors and visitors, ensuring everything ran smoothly. The once intimidating formality of the place now pulsed with vibrant, welcoming energy. At the close of the gala, Victoria stepped onto the stage to address the audience. Beneath the gentle glow of chandeliers, she thanked everyone for supporting the arts, highlighting that part of the Alden's mission was to serve as a culturally inclusive space. She announced a new scholarship funded by Gray Hospitality Ventures, offering mentorship and internship opportunities to young performers who might not otherwise have access to Manhattan's competitive arts scene. Applause thundered. Phone cameras captured her poised smile. In that moment, she felt a wave of gratitude for how far they'd come. The Alden was no longer just a backdrop to a viral scandal. It was a beacon of resilience and possibility. Perhaps that was her greatest triumph, turning a nightmare into impetus for positive change. At the evening's end, she wandered onto one of the hotel's balconies, gazing over Manhattan's shimmering skyline. Simone, Donovan, and Grace joined her, holding glasses of sparkling cider. They toasted to the successful gala, to each other, and to the Alden's bright path forward. Donovan grinned widely. "You realize we've gone from scandal to success story in record time, right? Travel magazines are calling us the model for corporate accountability," Grace added, "and the board is thrilled with our bottom line. Occupancy is at an all-time high. It's a rare feat to do good and do well financially." Victoria set down her glass, letting the city lights twinkle in her view. "But let's keep our promise," she said softly. "The minute we become complacent, we risk slipping back into old patterns. We need to keep striving, keep listening, keep improving." Her colleagues nodded solemnly. Then, laughing with relief, they clinked their glasses again. The night air carried a crisp clarity, as though it too celebrated the victory of second chances. When they parted ways, Victoria stayed behind for a beat, letting the hush of late night swirl around her. She thought of the frightened face she'd worn that first day, the slap, the trembling shock. So many eyes had watched that moment, had formed opinions about her. Yet she had persisted. She had fought not only for her dignity, but for a culture shift. And in doing so, she discovered a reservoir of unity among staff who welcomed the chance to prove the Alden could be better. A soft breeze brushed her cheek where the bruise once lingered. It felt like a final, gentle sign. She turned away from the glittering skyline and headed inside, resolved to continue shaping the Alden story, one anchored in compassion, justice, and resilience. Through one shocking incident, Victoria Gray uncovered the hidden biases lurking behind the Alden's grand facade. Though humiliated and hurt, she refused to let hate or injustice define her. By demanding accountability, embracing thorough staff training, and championing genuine empathy, she transformed the Alden not just into a profitable luxury hotel, but also into a beacon of inclusivity and respect. Richard Patterson's downfall served as a stark reminder that our actions and assumptions have lasting consequences. Still, this story is about more than one manager's misdeed. It's about reclaiming dignity and building a workplace where every voice matters. In rising above betrayal and public humiliation, Victoria exemplified resilience, forging a legacy of positive change in an industry often bound by appearance and status. If this story moved you, please hit the like button, share it with friends, and subscribe. Let's continue championing fairness, integrity, and hope together.